to write a great suspense novel, but avoid the too stupid to live character, because those are really annoying. Too stupid to live character is the one who walks into the house where you know the serial killer is waiting, and they don't turn on the lights, and they don't take any precautions, they don't pick up a baseball bat, they just go and they end up being killed by the serial killer. Those are the characters that really annoy us, because you're sitting there on the couch watching this movie going, don't go in that house, turn on a light, grab a bat. You're yelling at them to do these things. If you want your reader to really love your characters and to root for them, then you don't want to make them into these too stupid to live people. You want to make them fully fleshed out, well-rounded, strong characters. But how do you do that? By creating an ordinary person that's put into these extraordinary circumstances, but still make them come across as strong and with the ability to overcome whatever is happening in your suspense novel. The first place you need to start is studying really good suspense novels. You cannot write a genre if you don't study it and understand how it works and develop that innate sense of the structure. Even though I've published 87 books, I still study the books that I read. I tear them apart for the plot and for the characters and for great lines and where they did twists and things like that. I use all of these different little flags to color code the things that I really want to study and understand how this author did it. To me, it's like putting a puzzle together backwards. Like, I've got the puzzle there, I'm going to tear it apart and reassemble it so I can learn those lessons and take them to my own books. Number one, you want to give them skills and strengths that are believable based on their background. If your character is not a scientist, then they're not going to come up with some kind of secret formula for a poison in the back of their head. They're just not going to think of that because they're not in that profession and they're not in that life. You want to give your character skills and strengths that they can use in your book. When you're creating them, you don't want to just give them random skills and strengths. You want ones that you can use for them to overcome in the novel. For instance, if your character's a rock climber, then make sure that somewhere in your suspense novel, the bad guy is chasing after your character and they've got to climb a rock to get out of there. Allow them to use their skills and strengths to succeed. In The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose, which is a really great book, the main female character is a defense attorney, and she uses all of the skills that she gained through that to win a case that's going on throughout the book. But as you go through the book a little bit further, you can see that she's also using those skills that make a great defense attorney to accomplish other goals in the book that have to do with the suspense plot. And I don't want to give it away, but her ability to understand how a crime scene works, her ability to understand how evidence works, her ability to understand motives and the way that other people work, all of those skills and strengths that make her a great defense attorney also give her things that really show up on the page when she needs them to in this suspense novel. In Riley Sager's Survive the Night, we've got an ordinary female protagonist who's caught in a car ride with a possible serial killer. She doesn't have any super duper skills and strengths. She doesn't know martial arts. She doesn't have a weapon. She doesn't know how to do anything like that. So she uses the skills and strengths that make the most sense to her. She's a huge movie buff. And so everything that she thinks of to try to combat the serial killer that she's riding with is driven from a movie that she's seen. She remembers this scene and says, oh, I can do this. And she comes up with pretty inventive ways to either try to get away from him or to get help that are all based on the skills and strengths that she has gained from watching a movie. So definitely give your main character in a suspense novel some skills and strengths. At the same time, you want to have the flip side of that. You want to give them weaknesses, but you don't want those weaknesses to be so big that the reader's thinking there's no way that this character can survive. So if you have a character who's terrified of heights, let's say, you've got to give her enough courage to go ahead and go up to that height to get away from the bad guy, to overcome her weakness. Because a lot of what we really like to see in books is characters overcoming. So if you have a character with a weakness like claustrophobia or a fear of heights or whatever other kind of weaknesses you want to give them, absolutely exploit it in the book for a little while, but then give them the strength to overcome it or to battle it or to face it in order to succeed and win, because the reader is going to see them doing that and root for them 10 times more. When a character confronts their fears, it makes them 1,000 times more relatable and makes people really want to see them succeed. The other thing you want to avoid when you're making a suspense protagonist is making them too perfect. Especially if you have somebody that's like a detective. They have to fail. And that goes back to that weaknesses thing. They have to fail in order to succeed and in order to get the reader to say, you can do this, you can solve it. So give them a past that has some deep emotional wounds that cause some kind of trauma or trust issues, and also some kind of failures. If you read the Harry Bosch series by Michael Connelly or the Myron Bolitar series by Harlan Coben, both authors that I love a lot, you will see that these two people are very smart and they figure out how to solve things sort of like Sherlock Holmes. But they have weaknesses and pasts that get them into trouble. Harry Bosch is kind of like skated on the rules of being a cop, and so that has gotten him into trouble a little bit over each of the books. Myron Bolitar has other weaknesses that makes him have to call in a friend or get somebody else to help him because he can't do it all on his own. And that creates a dynamic of trust with the reader because the reader sees that this person is not perfect. And when they're not perfect, the reader really connects with them because we're not perfect. We don't want to read about people that get everything right every single time. We want to see them fail, pick themselves up, fail again. We want to see them have a whole bunch of odds that they have to face that are almost impossible. Those are all their conflicts that are getting in the way. The whole appeal with John McClane in Die Hard, even though he is an alcoholic who has alienated his wife and ticked off a whole lot of bad guys, is that he really wants to do the right thing. And he continues to work hard to save the people that he cares about, despite having ticked off the entire police force, being on the edge of divorce and being hungover. So his strength and his commitment to the people that he cares about is what keeps us rooting for him, even though we know he isn't perfect. That makes the reader want even more to redeem this character at the end so that John McClane ends up with his wife, or, he stops drinking or gets his job back on the force, which we all know doesn't happen because there's like 5 diehards, so he doesn't learn his lesson. But at the end of each movie, it seems like he did. And so you've got that nice, cathartic, happy ending that you were looking for as you saw this imperfect character overcoming impossible odds. Do you want to write a book in 12 weeks and know exactly what should happen at each step of the plot process? Then join my bootcamp. This bootcamp is going to talk about how to write turning points, how to do scene and sequel, how to create a really powerful black moment, how to plan your book, how to create an amazing ending, and then how to revise it and make it stronger and more emotional. Add code YouTube for an extra 10% off, and finally get your book idea from once upon a time to the end. On top of that, it's a good thing to show that your main character is afraid sometimes. You don't want them to be perfect, and you want them to be afraid sometimes. That makes us really want to see them succeed, and we're afraid with them. When your main character is thinking, I'm sitting next to a serial killer on this car ride, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out? The reader is really, really worrying about her. In The Quarry Girls by Jess Lowry, an ordinary teenage girl is kidnapped and kind of kept in this cave sort of situation. She doesn't actually know where she's at or how she's going to get out. And she is terrified. And every time the bad guy comes and she's terrified, we're terrified with her. She's in the dark. She doesn't know what's going on. She's hungry. She's cold. She's been away from home for several days. But yet she still finds the strength to keep fighting and to find a way out of this situation, or to try to find a way out of this situation. And so as she shows that vulnerability on the page of being afraid, she connects more with the reader because the reader really understands what it's like to be afraid. So don't hold back from showing your character being afraid. Even if they are a big Dwayne Johnson, The Rock type character, they need to show that little bit of vulnerability to make them believable. The final thing that goes into a really great protagonist for a suspense novel is a worthy goal. It's not enough just to solve the mystery. You want your main character to be there for a reason that matters a lot to them. And this is a common mistake I see in a lot of the writers that I work with. They come up with this great suspense plot. They've got a dead body, they've got a cop that's got to solve it and get the right man behind bars. So there's great external motivation there. But what makes a really believable protagonist in a suspense novel is an internal motivation. If your main character has to solve this murder because his best friend is locked up for the crime, or because his sister is being framed for it, then the stakes get even higher and the reader is 10 times more invested than they would be if it was just random strangers. So when you make some kind of a connection between your main character and whatever the suspense plot is, you give them a stronger motivation for being there, which gives the reader a stronger motivation to keep reading. So as you're plotting your suspense novel, think about, how can I tie this in with my character's past? How can I make this matter much, 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 much more to my character? How can I make solving this crime or figuring out who did it or catching the bad guy more important to them than it would be otherwise? For instance, in The Quarry Girls, the girl that gets kidnapped is somebody that the other girls in the book know, and it gives them a stronger motivation to figure out what happened. And it also looks like people that they care about are somehow involved in this suspense plot. So that drives them even more to put the pieces together and figure out the plot behind what happened with this disappearance. Make sure you're studying a wide variety of suspense authors if you really want to learn how to write great suspense. You want to have a wide range range of characters and settings and approaches to see exactly how a really compelling suspense novel goes. That also really helps you develop a great, strong suspense protagonist and helps you avoid that too stupid to live character. Remember, nobody really wants to read about the too stupid to live character. One of the things that Stephen King said is that he writes about ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And that's something we really like in a suspense novel, is an ordinary person that has to overcome extraordinary circumstances in order to succeed. And if you're writing about somebody that's maybe not ordinary, maybe a superhero or a cop or something else that's more involved, you're going to give them a lot more motivation to do this, which will create those extraordinary circumstances. If somebody that they care about is at risk, they're going to work that much harder. So make sure you go back and raise the stakes, increase your character's strength, give them some weaknesses, and make the overall book have more conflict and motivation and layering. And then you will create characters that are believable and that readers root for. And if you want more on how to write strong characters, check out this playlist here. You'll find a lot of videos on how to create strong male characters, female characters, how to make them more believable, and how to make readers really fall in love with them.